Good morning, Bardstown and Nelson County, and welcome to another edition of Bradford and Brooks. Jim Brooks and Margie Bradford with you this morning on this kind of cool, overcast morning. Margie, I kind of miss our the 70-degree temperatures we had a week or so ago.
Oh yeah. And I've got about 40 tons of leaves in my yard if you want to come and
mulch them?
Roll in them or mulch them or something.
No, I've got leaves of my own. Unfortunately, the winds didn't go in the right direction this year. Usually they blow off the top of my hill down on the field behind me. Not so. The fence caught them all this time. No.
Nature's not cooperating, huh?
No. Well, Margie, we have a very special studio guest with us today. A man who's been steeped in education, and he recently resigned as a member of the Nelson County Schools Board of Education, Mr. Damon Jackey. And Damon, thanks for coming in today.
I appreciate it, Jim. Apologies for my voice. I'm kind of recovering from some of this weather that we've all been having. But I do want to say this is my favorite week of the year. And the reason why is it's Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
My close friends that say it's because of all the food, because I love food, but more so it's just about giving thanks. And I want to start out by saying I really appreciate both of you all. I mean, Margie, your 30-plus years of dedication to public education, both here locally as well as statewide and nationally. And Jim, I've always loved our conversations that we would have, whether it was about old cars or politics or whatever it might be. So I'm grateful for both of you all.
Well, speaking of old cars, did I see a MG hood for sale?
No, excuse me. No, it's a Triumph. Yeah, okay. It's a Triumph. It is. So my son has a 1970 Spitfire Triumph, man K3. That's his little baby. That's what he wanted. But we've got a friend that also has a Triumph and had a parts car. So he stores it at our place, and we try and sell parts off of it for him.
All righty. Well, I could.
Do you need a bonnet for a Triumph? A 1500? We can take care of you, Jim.
I've always loved Triumphs. I always have. My sister-in-law had one before she was my sister-in-law, and after they got married, it mostly sat in front of their house, broken down.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a reputation. I don't know if that's deserved or not.
It may be deserved. His right now has a little bit of work needs to happen to it. Now, I will tell you, he put together a 60 or 70 slide Google slide deck to present to my wife and I on why he needed this car. And this particular car,
right?
It's a 4-speed. Hey, he'll learn how to drive a stick. Hey, the MK3s fixed the death wobble in the rear end. I mean, he did his research, so.
Wow, that's the use of technology.
There you go. Yep.
That's great. That's great. Well, I will tell you that as owner of several old vehicles in the past, and still proud of my 56 Plymouth, there's always something. There's always something to fix or adjust, so it kind of comes with the territory.
It does, but that's part of the fun, isn't it?
Exactly. That's what I try to tell my wife. So,
just ask Jaylene now.
Well, it's like any of us. Once we start getting 50 years old, there's stuff that has to be tinkered about us, isn't there?
That's what.
Unfortunately, there's not too many parts stores open for hearts and lungs and legs and knees.
All right. Well, you and I can talk cars.
We can talk cars offline. Yeah.
But today we're talking about education. Your years as a member of the board and your resignation. And I know you've talked about it, written about it on Facebook and other media outlets. But can you give us a rundown on what prompted you to decide to resign from the board?
Sure. There's certain lines that I think you don't cross in public service. And I continue to see those lines crossed more and more over this calendar year. Some of the specifics, there's a board member that's taken campaign contributions from plaintiffs of a lawsuit against the board. So whether that's legal or illegal, I don't know. Does it smell right? No. I think that's one of those where you got to start questioning, are you doing the bidding of people that are suing the board, or are you doing what's right for students? that I've heard and talked with central office employees who say that the current board chairman has made comments to them that, well, whenever we get rid of Wes, then you better watch out for your job. And I'm gonna turn over here and look at Margie. So what's one of the first things as board members that we're always told that we have zero involvement in?
Well, you have no involvement whatsoever, either in the hiring or the firing or the discipline of a teacher or staff member.
Exactly. And so whenever I, talked with a couple central office people who said, yep, that those types of comments had been made to them, that's extremely concerning. The board chair had shared out personnel information about an investigation, which, again, that's one of those things.
Also against the law.
Thank you, Margie. Yes, yep. A lot of these times I may be looking over at you, Margie, going, so what is it about this that we should be concerned about? But if you want to talk about the straw that broke the camel's back, so it's pretty obvious that there's three board members that, one, they don't like Wes for some reason, superintendent, who is probably one of the brightest educators that I've ran across in my 30-plus years in public schools. In fact, I got a text yesterday from a person in Eastern Kentucky saying, we'll take Wes. We'll take him. One of the smartest people that I've ran across. But it seems like they also are wanting to have one high school. And we thought that was put to bed back in January. In fact, they even publicly state, nope, that's not something we want to deal with, and now it's come back up again.
Right, and it had been reviewed in the local planning committee, several different options.
And that's something that the LPC did not say would meet the needs of what our problems were, which is at the middle school level, not the high school level.
Right.
So what I was going to say, though, the straw that broke the camel's back, on the afternoon of that board meeting in October, I received a text message that indicated Amanda said they have the 3 votes. Now, what's the other thing, Margie?
You can, no more than 2 school board members can meet in meeting. It would 3 school board members constitutes a school board meeting, and that's illegal.
Exactly, and even if it's not 3 school board members meeting together physically in person, like the 3 of us are today.
Right.
But if I call Jim and say, Jim, you're going to vote yes, right? And then I call you, Margie, and say, Margie, you're going to vote yes, right? Well, I'm going to vote yes, too. That constitutes a serial meeting.
Yes, it does.
And that is the reason why we have laws, regulations around public boards for those things not to happen. And it wasn't until that happened that I got that text message that I said, that's it. I cannot be part of a board that does not understand that this is a body politic. This is not individuals who can do whatever they want to. I mean, we even had one board member that contacted an attorney outside the board attorney to then contact Wes to see if they could buy out his contract. They took that upon themselves as an individual. Now, as a board member, can you do anything as an individual, Margie?
No, you absolutely. School board members, of course, have to have training, and that's one of the things we've talked about are the things that they put the most emphasis on, is that you are only the member of a unit.
Correct.
You have no individual power as a school board member whatsoever.
Well, it's, I still reflect back to whenever it comes to superintendents, no superintendent ever made the right decision on canceling school for snow, right? No superintendent ever hired or fired the wrong person. Every one of them is going to find something at fault with them.
Right.
But I do think back to something when I first came on the board back in 2008. Dr. Lance was our superintendent at that time. And I know there's a lot of people that they don't like Dr. Lance for this or for that. But here's two things that I learned from Dr. Lance that, I've taken to heart. One of them is school boards are a body politic. You do not have individual power. And what we have right now with the Nelson County School Board, there are a few members that believe they have individual power.
Right.
The other thing is always make decisions that are what is in the best interest of students, not what is easiest for adults.
Right.
And I think what we're starting to see now in our community is that while some of the work over the past couple of years has been focused on students and what could make improvements for students, we now have some members of the board who are actually looking at what's going to make it easiest for adults. And that is, again, one of those lines that just you do not cross.
Or just what they want as a matter of tradition, what they've always, don't want change, and change is not easy and it's not fun. But that's the only way we grow.
You nailed that, Margie. As humans, we like to be comfortable. We don't like things to change. Whether it's no longer can we find that style of shirt that we always like, in the stores they've discontinued it, or in this case, change to the way we can improve the educational opportunities for our students. We cannot keep looking backwards and say, well, let's get it back to where the good old days were. The three of us in here, we had great educational experiences, right? We went to school in the 80s, 70s, 60s. I'm not asking for any commitment there on the dates, but we did. We had great experiences. But that time has passed. What businesses are asking for today are very different than what they asked for even in the 1990s or 1980s. And so that's something that the Nelson County Schools is trying to prepare students for. But there's a very small contingent of people in Nelson County that are uncomfortable with change. They like to talk about save our school, right? Really what it boils down to is save one school. I don't think I've seen any of them talk about, Thomas Nelson High School, no, let's save that school too, and all the great work that's going on there. So I think that can kind of give us an answer of really what this is all about. This is about one outlying corner of the county saying, just don't mess with us, just leave everything alone for us. We like the status quo of the way it was 40 or 50 years ago. You all do whatever you want to do in the rest of the county.
Well, it was that same area that held up even having, one high school for Nelson County. How many years ago? 20 years ago?
Well, no, there was 69, 70. I mean, we're talking about 50-plus years ago.
I mean, so that they fought that very hard.
Well, if you stop and think about this, so the entirety of Nelson County, there's really 5 areas. There's Bardstown proper, okay? You've got Boston area, you got New Haven, you got Bloomfield, and then you've got that Cox's Creek, Deatsville area.
Right.
But for right now, I mean, if you just stop and think about Boston, New Haven, and Bloomfield, what's the difference? What is something that jumps out at you about those 3 areas that's different? And to me, it is the Bloomfield area. There's 2 schools out there. And so I've talked with former board members who said originally out in Bloomfield it was supposed to be a K-8 school as well. And in the early 2000s, whenever Chaplin and Eli Brown were deemed just not in any shape that students should be attending anymore, and you can't really renovate them at that point, that the plan was that they were going to add on to Bloomfield Middle School and turn it into a K-8. And that portion of the county threw a fit and said, no, we want 2 separate schools. Now, early 2000s, and don't get me wrong, I mean, Bloomfield Elementary, Bloomfield Middle School, 2 great schools. great staff in them. Both of my kids went through those schools. There's still some of the same staff out there that my kids had. Great educators. But 20 plus years ago, whenever Bloomfield Elementary was built as a separate school building, I bet it cost about $25 million, give or take. If it was just added on to Bloomfield Middle, it probably would have only been about $10 million, about half of that. That other bonding capacity 20 years ago could have been used for some of the other things that a lot of people in our community keep saying, why aren't you addressing our school, like New Haven?
Like New Haven, yeah.
Exactly. And so, I say that to share, and to tag on to what you said, Margie, 50-some years ago, Bloomfield High School was being consolidated into Nelson County. People in that area did not like that.
No.
They wanted to be left alone.
And if they had made it a K-8 school, they wouldn't be facing closing today, would they?
Well, I think what you would end up seeing is there probably would have been a lot more equity across those K-8s. Probably at some point there would have been a K-8 also built out in the Deedsville, Cox's Creek area. But with that said, K-8s, they've done their time. At the middle school level, and this is where the problem has been focused, is our middle school.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that...
Well, that's a watershed year. Those are watershed years, the middle school. It's when they're making their decisions about how they're going to go.
It is. But one of the challenges that this community has faced has been trying to provide the opportunities for middle school students. So 30-some years ago, in fact, whenever I went through the University of Kentucky College of Ed, I was the last group that would have had the opportunity to be what was called Certified K-8 Lifetime. And you probably remember those certifications, Margie. That just basically meant you could teach any grade, K through 8, any subject forever, no other certifications needed. So K-8s actually had the ability to be staffed well at that time.
Right.
Fast forward, so 27 years after 1990, would have been about 2017, those K-8 people, they've all retired. Probably even before 2017, all those K-8 people retired. Now what we're seeing is problems with staffing middle schools with subject certified people. Typically a middle school certification is you have 2 subjects. Mine was mathematics and social studies. We're having challenges trying to find teachers to fill those certification spots at middle school, especially whenever you're talking about there's only about 35 students at each grade level at Boston and New Haven.
Right.
So that's kind of what started that conversation back in April of 2021 of how do we make sure that we've got the right size of middle schools, the student body, so that it's not so big that kids get lost in the shuffle, but not so small that you're not able to staff them and give them the opportunities, which led into that whole community campus, what that's been called. So
Right. To me, the whole community campus idea was more efficient use of resources, especially in the middle school years, and provide equitable opportunity to all the kids. Kids, I look at high school and I think I would give anything to be, I wouldn't want to be, high school age again, but the opportunities you have now versus what I had in high school are just tremendous.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this idea of having middle schools on the 2 high school campuses, one on the Thomas Nelson, one on the Nelson County campus. So let's stop and think. We want students to have academic, extracurricular, athletic opportunities.
Yeah.
We all know that you need to have that hook to get kids to want to be there in school and be engaged and find opportunities to be leaders. So let's say you do have about 500 middle schoolers on each of those 2 campuses. So think about that 7th or 8th grader there's several of them, let's say, that they want to take French 1. Maybe as 8th graders, there's 20 students that, we'd like to take French 1. Well, then as freshmen, what are they going to be doing? French 2. And then as they get into their sophomore, their junior years, you're able to have even higher levels of rigor whenever it comes to the class offerings. Or those students at the middle school level as an 8th grader who are those Algebra 1 students.
Yeah.
So what are they going to take as a freshman? Geometry, probably.
Yeah.
As a sophomore, maybe pre-calc. And so, this whole idea of being able to provide more academic opportunities for students, more athletic opportunities, if you stop and think about it, it aligns those middle schools with the high school that they would be going to. And I still remember, and you know this teacher, Mo Shams.
Oh, yeah.
At Bardstown. You know Mo too?
Believe me, I've known Mo for years.
I've known Mo for years as well, and I still, every now and then, I still visit with Mo, and we sit and we talk everything from mathematics to politics to religion. But one of the things that still sticks in my mind, whenever I became a freshman at Bardstown High School, or was getting ready to become a freshman, he went to my parents and said, handsome brother Damon, he needs to do something other than just academics. He needs to have an athletic endeavor. So I started playing tennis. And so Mo already knew about me as a middle schooler at the Bardstown City Schools. Now let's translate that to Nelson County High School and Thomas Nelson High School.
Yeah.
Think about that. If those middle school students are on those same 2 campuses, I guarantee you those high school coaches, academic teachers, mathematics teachers, they're going to know if little old Jim Brooks was that 8th grader over there at Thomas Nelson Middle School, they'd go, we know Jim. We're going to help guide him, and we're going to make sure that he gets through high school with all the success he needs.
That's one of the things that I think is so great about the Bardstown school system is there's always been that linkage between the middle school and the high school, and a sense of cooperation there.
Well, and it's not just. I agree with you, 1,000%, Margie. But you know what? That's all over the state, those types of opportunities happen. There's 120 counties in Kentucky, which means there's 120 county schools. There are 171 school districts. That means there's 51 independents like Bardstown City Schools.
Right, exactly.
The majority of those have some flavor of 712, 612, Bergen Independent, an hour from here. K-12, all in the same 2-story building.
Right.
And so those opportunities to get to know students, to be able to create learning opportunities for them have always been there. Yes, I mean, there are bad things that happen. We all know that. But whenever you start building that culture in schools, you reduce that, and you make it be something where students start ending up holding each other accountable.
Right.
We don't do that here at our school. Quit doing that. Quit bothering that student. That's not what we're about.
Right.
All right, you're back with Bradford and Brooks and our special guest, Damon Jackey. And we've been talking education and reminiscing a little bit about one of my favorite teachers, Mo Shams, who at Bardstown. He was a tough teacher, but an excellent teacher. And he spent a lot of time lobbying me to go to Speed Engineering School. I went to electronics school, and the reason I did was because I wasn't confident my English skills would pass freshman English. I'd had a nun in the 6th grade tell me, Jimmy Brooks, your grammar skills are so poor you'll never pass college English.
And look at you now.
But anyway, I took that to heart, but he was like, Brother Brooks, you need to go to engineering school. Yeah. And of course I didn't, but things have turned out okay anyway.
They have, and I bet you learned more than just physics from him too while you were in his class.
Well, one thing I did, and he asked me if I would come 2 days a week after school. He had a closet next to his classroom was at the end, and he had that
little closet down at the end of the hall.
Yeah. Yep. And so it was a mess. And he asked me if I would come and help him, organize it or, purge what needed to go, et cetera. So all the time I was up there every day till 5 o'clock, or not every day, but a couple days a week. And we did a lot of talking.
Yeah.
Did a lot of talking.
Yep.
But I did learn a lot from him.
I still every now and then, I go. In fact, just last week I had lunch with Mo. My wife and I met him, or I took him over to Cracker Barrel, and we sat there. And even though mathematics was his thing, if you stop and you listen, there was so much more you would get out of his classes. I mean, it was about just how to handle yourself as a human. There could be some religion in it. Here's someone who is Muslim, but has studied across all religions. And I enjoy sometimes whenever I sit down, we'll just kind of meander conversations, kind of like we're doing right here.
Yeah.
Right.
All of a sudden now we're talking about Mo Shams, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, having teachers like that that become engaged with you as a student
Right.
are so critical. And that's one of the things that I will say the Nelson County Schools is doing a wonderful job at, is that they're having teachers that end up understanding what is that gift that students bring to the table. You may not be the best when it comes to grammar, little Jimmy Brooks, but there's something else that is special about you, a gift that you bring to the table, and that is what we're going to keep pushing you for. So
Right. And that's why the arts are so important
Right.
in education, because it gives the outlet. It lets people discover their talents and get more fulfillment out of life.
Yeah.
Really.
One of the things that talking about some of the most recent events, and like I shared before the break, that proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, the fact that one of the board members said, I'm paraphrasing this, we've talked among three of us and we've at least got 3 votes to vote for one high school. So let's run the reel in reverse here. 15 or so years ago, this community came together and started discussing what is it that needed to be done at the high school level. Now, Nelson County High School at the time, overcrowded. Either it was going to be let's add on to that school, or the what if. What if we had 2 high schools, about 800 or so each, allowing them to grow as as time passes? What would that do for students? Because that is the thing we always have to focus on, is students.
Right.
And so the community at that time said, you know what? Based upon all this information that has been brought together, the recommendation of the LPC 15 or so years ago was, let's have this second high school, Thomas Nelson High School. Now, I'll have to admit, so I was came on the board right at the beginning of all of that, whenever it was going to go through the architecture design phase and so on. I thought to myself, you know what, it's going to be 5, 6, 7 years before that school really hits its stride. Within 2 to 3 years, that school already had an identity that was built. And the purpose of that school, it wasn't just to have a second high school. It was, let's give students more opportunities. Lily Miller. So I'm gonna call out another name here. So Lily Miller, she's a student at Thomas Nelson High School right now that I've gotten to know over the past several months. Come to find out, I knew her whenever she was born. Friends of ours, that she's a triplet, that we've known her since she was born. But Lily probably said it best in that, you know what, whenever she started at Thomas Nelson High School, she was maybe a little bit more timid, a little bit more of an introvert. But one of the athletic coaches out there kept coming to her going, you need to come out for softball. A week later, you need to come out for softball. And he kept on her, and he kept on her, and he kept on her. She went out for softball. She loves it. The purpose of those 2 high schools was to give more students opportunities like that. There's really only 2 sports that I can think of that you don't cut players on: football and track / cross country. I'll throw cross country in there.
Right.
All the rest, there are limits. And so whenever you have one huge, large high school, the number of opportunities for students is diminished dramatically. So what we would do if we went back to one high school model in this community, the Lily Millers, the JT Kamicks, these students that have found their place, that have found their opportunity to be engaged in something outside the classroom will disappear. And they'll just start kind of meandering back into the background, and they'll be lost in the shuffle of a huge high school.
Well, let me ask you this. If at the time that the decision was made to have Thomas Nelson, when it was being considered, one of the considerations was that you were overcrowded. Well, this is several years later.
And the numbers are still about the same, right?
Well, at the same or more, I would think you would have more pupils in that period of time. I mean, the county has grown.
It has.
And so, I mean, it seems to me that if that was a valid reason then, it would be a valid reason now to have...
To still retain the two high schools. Well, I think it is. In fact, so I can't remember exactly who presented this set of data. It was presented at a board meeting a few months ago. My gut tells me it was maybe planning zoning had a little bit of it in. Maybe it was some data pulled from census numbers. But so let's think about the areas of Nelson County. Bardstown proper, 40004.
Right.
Okay. Bloomfield, New Haven, Boston, Cox's Creek, Deansville.
Right.
So let's think about those 5 areas. So there was some data that was shared not long ago. Out of those 5, so here's where I get to ask you all questions.
Okay.
Out of those 5, which one of those 5 areas do you think has the highest percentage increase of school-age children? I'm thinking 0 through 18, okay?
All right.
So out of those 5 areas, which one has the highest percentage increase of school-age children?
Well,
Cox's Creek, Deansville.
Bardstown.
It's Bardstown.
Well, I knew it would be one of those.
Yeah, it'd be one or the other. But, I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? Because families typically live where they work or where they want their child to go to school.
Right.
So Bardstown is the number one. Now, the second highest one, Jim, Cox's Creek, Deansville area. Yeah. Now, let's flip that question. Out of those 5 areas, well, actually, we're down to 3 areas now. Which area has the highest percentage decrease of school-age children?
Bloomfield.
Bloomfield, yeah. In fact, it's a negative number. The demographics in Bloomfield have continued to decrease in the number of school-age children. And so this goes back to what you said, 50 years ago, Margie. There was a little bit of brouhaha about Bloomfield High School being consolidated.
Oh, yeah.
Goes back to 25 years ago of what I said a moment ago, that, well, Bloomfield, the intention was there to be a K-8. Ended up with 2 schools because there was a brouhaha. So where should schools be to serve the families in our community? They should be where the population is for those students.
Exactly.
And that's why, to what you were just saying, Margie, Thomas Nelson High School, that's the perfect support and reason for why that school, from just demographics, is still needed. And in fact, it's why probably there's still needed there to be a middle school there. Talking about, getting away from student demographics, talk about academics. So what we just see come out in the past few weeks, 4 weeks ago, something like that, whenever it had to do with state test scores. Well, apparently Thomas Nelson High School is the #1 high school in the state for college and career-ready students. Nelson County High School, I think, was in the top 10%, 12%. I forget the actual number. So something is being done right at both of those high schools to prepare students for their next phase of life, whether it is college, speed school, electronic school, or just going straight out into the workforce. Something's being done right. So why do we want to destroy and tear down when something's being done right? I think that's something that people really need to stop and start asking more questions about. I've got my suspicions. My suspicions are it's all about athletics. It's about getting back to 30 years ago, one big high school to compete on that largest stage whenever it came to certain athletics. But wait a minute, Thomas Nelson High School just had the boys and the girls cross-country state champions.
Yep.
Look at that, you know.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm getting at
Yeah.
here is some folks within the community have forgotten this is supposed to be about what's best for students, not what is easiest for adults. So,
well, Damon, let's look ahead. We just got a notice that the Nelson County School Board has a special called meeting next Monday at Central Office. Be a closed session for preliminary discussions that could lead to the appointment of a board member. So then the board, once that's complete, whenever they appoint one, then the board will be back at five
Right.
board members.
Right.
What do you say? What direction? Just now, this is just my observation, not necessarily learned observation, but it seems like the board since January has kind of just meandered, and there really hasn't been a definite direction until we get to the merge the high schools. Now, you know, the LPC, Local Planning Committee, spent months studying all these options. And it seems to me that the tail is wagging the dog if we have a local planning committee or maybe they need to reform one to look at options again. But, you know, there's always a chance the LPC may not come up with the option that the majority of the board like. But what kind of direction do you think we're going now? Because the board is, wants to investigate a single high school.
Sure. Well, you know, so one, I'll say, I think that letter that the interim commissioner at the Kentucky Department of Education sent to the board is very telling, in that, you know, the board voted to start going down the one high school pathway. And shortly after that, the letter came from KD that said, wrong. That is not what your district facility plan says. Therefore, you cannot do that, or you have to reconvene the local planning committee.
Right.
Now, let's talk about the local planning committee. It's comprised of, in regulation, certain number of members, certain makeup. There has to be so many parents, so many
Right.
teachers, so many administrators, and so on.
And my understanding is those groups select their participants.
They do. So, for instance,
Yeah.
the last time, whenever it was done in the fall of 21, so the schools PTO voted for parent representatives. Well, then what was done is those, and I'm going to just use simple math, those 12 parent representatives, 12 schools, 12 parent representatives, were put in a hat, and a name was randomly drawn.
Right.
Because there were only supposed to be so many parent reps.
Right.
Now, something else that was done back 2.5, well, almost 3 years ago now. No, 2 years ago, I'm sorry, fall of 21, was let's make sure that we have a good smattering from the entire county so that it's not weighted too far into the Bloomfield area or the Boston area or whatever. And so, I had people that told the board then that was the most fair, the most widely spread demographic makeup of an LPC that they had ever seen. So let's talk about it. If LPC is going to be reconvened, you're still going to have to go through all that same type of process. And I think something that the community needs to watch closely on is anybody going to try and put their finger on the scale and
Right.
tip it one way or the other? I don't know how many emails I got over this past spring, and when I was still on the board, that said, 2 years ago, whenever you all talked about community campus, I wasn't too sure about that. But I stopped, I listened, I asked some questions, I did a little bit more listening, and now I think that's the right thing. I think what we're seeing is the community is saying that's what they would like to have.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So is this board, however it's going to be made up, are they going to put their hand on that scale and try and tip it in another direction? Again, I think it's that one high school, it goes back to, it's about athletics. And that's a shame. Because, yes, athletics are important. It's something for students to be engaged in.
Right.
But that's not what schools are supposed to be about.
Well, I know that I I had heard allegations that the last LPC that was handpicked by the superintendent, and I knew that wasn't the case. But there's been all sorts of misinformation out there since, even before January.
Well, it's easy to throw out misinformation just to call it. I mean, that's a problem with our society right now. Is we could do a whole nother show on just what the problem is in our society right now. Let me throw out a bunch of information with a scatter gun, and then you're so confused about it, you can't tell what's right, what's wrong, what's truth, what's lies.
Right.
But no, it was one of the most fair and logical formations of an LPC, and this was someone outside of the county who does LPC facilitating as part of their work said, oh yeah, that was a great job you all did on that. I think something else the community needs to watch going forward. You just mentioned, Jim, that is it Monday the 27th, you said?
Monday, yes.
Yeah.
Monday the 27th, there's a special called board meeting, so they're probably going to appoint a new board member. So I think something else that the public needs to watch carefully is, obviously, they can pick whoever they want. It only takes a majority vote for that person to be appointed as a board member. Is one of the first things they're going to do is start attacking the current superintendent. Miss McGuire Dye, Miss Breeding spoke at the last school board meeting down at Boston, both former board members. And I forget which one said it, but one of them said, this type of a superintendent is what the community said they wanted. They wanted a proactive. They wanted a forward thinker. They wanted someone that would be thinking about 30 years from now, not 30 years in the past.
Right.
And so that's something that I think the community needs to watch closely with the current board, and once it gets back up to full speed, is will they go after the superintendent? Because I think there's also at least one board member, current board member, who's been on for about 11 years, who has never liked this superintendent because of the success that happened at Thomas Nelson, which is a shame. Shouldn't we be, Margie, shouldn't we be celebrating our schools? I always enjoy whenever Bardstown City Schools has something great going, and I would celebrate it. It shouldn't be about, let me tear down this other school system or this other high school because I only want one high school to be the best.
Right.
It shouldn't be. That's what public education should not be about.
Exactly right.
Well, I think, of course, when Wes Bradley was a principal, he had a golden opportunity with the opening Thomas Nelson to create a great culture and structure within it. Very innovative. I mean, it was like, what? Houses? What's this? And
now, let me interrupt you, and now if you go to other school districts, you'll scratch your head and go, wait a minute. They're copying what was done over there in Nelson County. It amazes. I mean, what's the old saying? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Right.
I mean, there are more and more school districts across the Commonwealth that are going with the house type of model, that are also trying to do things to talk about, things like profile of a learner, that students are more than just a test score.
Right.
Anytime someone says test score, test score, test score, I think about movies. When you say test score, you're talking about 1 5-minute scene of a movie. That does not give you the entire character development for that particular character in the movie. You've got to look at a lot of it. You've got to look at what they're doing in the community. You've got to look at all these other markers of what truly is achievement for that child. So test scores are one part of it.
Right.
They're not the only part of it.
Right. All right. Well, we're down. We got about 3 minutes left, Damon. Any final words of wisdom or comments about how should parents be watching what the board is doing moving forward?
Well, I would just encourage parents, business partners in the community, even people that don't have students in the community, because it impacts all of us.
Oh, yeah.
To continue to attend school board meetings, to demand that the school board have transparency, continue to, now, and this will sound kind of odd, continue emailing concerns or thoughts to the school board members, although I will say that from what I continue to hear, there's only one school board member that responds typically, and that's Miss Bowling, Tracy Bowling, wonderful, intelligent lady.
Yes.
But still, you need to continue to use your voice to advocate for students.
Right.
Not advocate for what is easiest for us adults.
Right.
So I think that's something we all can do. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about Nelson County, Bardstown City Schools, our great parochial schools. Just continue to be that voice for what's best for students.
All right, and again, let me announce that the Nelson County Schools will have a special board meeting next Monday at at 5:30 at Central Office, and it'll be a closed session for preliminary discussions that could lead to the appointment of a board member. And Damon, you said they have until about mid-December?
Yeah, I think the law states that within 60 days of voting to accept the resignation, either the board has to appoint someone or the control of that reverts back to the Department of Education.
Right. All right, so we'll be watching that again. That's Monday at 5:30, Central Office. You of course, closed sessions, the public's not invited. But if there is an appointment made, you'll probably get to know who the new board member is.
I think it would still be a wise idea for people in the community to show up to that meeting, even though there is a closed session. There could be an open session.
Well, they have to go back into open session.
They would
to make the appointment, because you can't make any
decisions.
You can't make any decisions in closed session.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now, the most important question: what time is Thanksgiving dinner on Thursday at your all's house?
Actually, it's going to be Saturday at our
Well,
house.
mine's going to be Saturday too.
Well, ours is going to be Friday up in Lexington, I hear, at my daughter's house. So that's the important stuff, is being thankful and what we're going to eat this week.
Yes, and getting somebody else to cook the meal.
Well, probably my wife's going to cook the turkey, but the daughter's hosting, so
Now-
it's good.
Are you all turkey or ham, or turkey and ham?
Oh, Jim, bite your tongue. It's turkey, buddy. It's turkey. It's turkey. It's dressing. Gotta have some homemade rolls in there, and dumplings. Gotta have dumplings.
All right. Well, we are out of time. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you next week for another Bradford and Brooks.
Oh.